This is Calicat, the Calicatsta, and this is episode 9 of Picard, season 2, Hide and Seek. They probably just took them thinking, oh, it's two different Star Trek fans. We'll just crib their stuff. Here we have, now on to the story. We have the Siege of the La Serena. We have the guards that can't shoot, but they kind of explained that because they said in the last episode the assimilation's not perfect. It messes with them. So, yeah, it's not perfect. The Romulan lady shows up again. They figure out a clever way to bring back Elnor. I keep calling him Elron, but that's funny. But Elnor, by making him the emergency combat hologram. And although that doesn't quite make sense, okay, sure, why not? Since he's a hologram, they can't shoot him because he's a hologram. Shoot right through him. Holograms can't die. However, these super soldier guys, military army guys, apparently can't hit a broadside of a barn. There's literally 4 people and an elderly man who's 100 years old, according to Starfleet records, running around, and it's like they can't hit them. This does seem a little bit strange, yes. This episode is better than the last one. The last one was kind of lame. But it's still, because they're using fan stories that they don't understand. They didn't ask me. And they didn't ask Track Guards, and they didn't ask Red Letter Media either. They didn't ask their fan film either. They just cribbed some of that too. That they kind of didn't get it right. And Sillian space is a Star Trek parody. They probably don't realize that. It's a Star Trek, basically. They're the board of the Borg. And here we have an evil Soong, Adam Soong character, who if his genetic, like in the previous episode, they said the daughter took the freedom thing. I guess it cured her, right? But his ancestors' descendants won't look anything like him, so that doesn't make sense. We don't know what happened to her. Also, there needs to be Renee Picard that lives or dies. The timeline. The Borg Queen and Jurati fight, and then they fight the girls on the bridge, and of course there's a cat fight. Seven is injured, and in order to save her, they have to Borgify her a little bit, which makes it possible for them to use her Borg technology to get them home, because she can connect to the Borg. So the Red Letter Media guys did totally guess the ending of the story the second time they reviewed Picard. This isn't the end, though. There's another episode. But they totally guessed it. They said, oh, Jurati's going to become the Borg Queen, and it's not Picard's mother. It's Jurati. She's going to become the Borg Queen. Like, oh my, that's what they did. So in the other timeline, when the other Borg show up in 2401, that's the Jurati Borg Queen. That's got to be what happened. It's the alternate Borg that show up on the Stargate. So Picard basically didn't have to blow up his ship. He could have just, in the other timeline. Borg lady steals the ship. Spoiler. Which is remarkably similar to the end of Mary Sue Jumps the Shark, except we got the ship back from the Borg by in that one because Admiral Cat, or Captain Vice Admiral Cat, of course, figured out a way to figured out a way to stop them at the last minute. And Q was involved, so yeah, Q. Q in this version seems to be a Sillian Q who doesn't have his powers. That's the Overlords and that kind of thing. And this version of Soong is an Overlord from the Sillian space. And you could even say that the other one is too, the Spanish lady could be a Sillian. Yeah, but definitely Soong and the Queen and the other one are Sillian versions of those characters and not actually them. Now, they could redeem the whole series by saying this other timeline is Sillian space. It's not really Star Trek. They're not affecting anything by going to 2024 because it's a different timeline and they can do whatever they want. There's a plot device that they try to worm their way around. The melancholy that's run through the whole thing. They've done this a couple of shows, including Moon Knight as well. Melancholy is not dissociative disorder, though. Melancholy is something else. But they keep referencing melancholy. The Renee Picard has it, and then Picard's mother had it, and but there was that episode of Where No One Has Gone Before, second episode of Next Generation, where, well, they hadn't established everything yet, but still, they established that Picard's mother shows up on the other side of the galaxy and says, "Oh, what's your dad? Yes, oh my mom." Offers him tea in the space, the warp. Of course, they had explained that away here because there's a scene where Melancholy Picard. It's really obvious. The foreshadowing here is hit you with a brick or a rock through an atrium. So the hide and seek game went wrong. And Baltar Picard or Maurice. It's supposed to be Maurice. Doesn't look anything like him. Maurice is different. It's supposed to be what it is, but he's Baltar from Battlestar Galactica, the reboot, and he didn't recognize him as the counselor in the other timeline. They sort of fudged their way around that by saying Picard says to the Laris clone that the memory's not exactly the way he remembered it. And when they release the memory, it's not exactly the same. It's not quite how I remembered it as a child, which is cool because, yes, memories when you're like 10 or 11 years old are completely different, like 30 years, or in this case, 80 years later. And you remember things that are completely you remember time moves differently when you're a child. It's different. So time seems to move differently. How would he understand that his mother, like, he let his mother out of the safe room or whatever. She went and cacked herself in the story. Even though in that other timeline in Where No One Has Gone Before, the Next Generation, 35 years ago, she's an old woman. But Picard explains, he explains, I imagined her as an older woman as she grew up, and so they covered their butts right there, which is that means they saw that episode and they're like, oh, the fans are totally going to reference, oh, she was an old woman in that one episode. No, he imagined her that way. So that was in his mind when she showed up and said, "I'm not dead, Jean-Luc." That was him imagining her as, okay, all right, that's a little silly, but sure, I'll give him that one. As for the guards that can't hit shit and they get sword play and phaser. Apparently the heroes can't hit shit either. They have phased pistols that shoot like projectile plasma, which is weird, instead of a regular phaser, and it blows things up. I guess it's the alternate timeline though, in which they could get away with that too. It's the alternate evil Star Trek where they have disruptors, basically. They disrupt things. There's a cool shot in which a guy gets disrupted. I thought that they actually blew up soon at the end, didn't they? They did, because they handed the phaser to him and he said, "Oh, it'll explode if you put it in the wrong hands." How would he know that? Did he study all the weapons of the alternate La Serena and knew it was going to blow up? Because that would be really I'm going to blow up the gun. Yeah, they kind of implied that he exploded. Yeah, the gun exploded. It blew up. I mean, he should be dead. So I don't know what's going on there. Queen Girardi. That's a bad idea because she's based on the fictional character Penny / Jody / all the other who is a character who has melancholy actually, but also she is DOD. She's schizophrenic or on the spectrum of that. So she's both. She has both of that. She's like Moon Knight. But yes, she has DOD. So, dissociative disorder. More so than melancholy. Dissociative. Sees things that aren't there. Melancholia is depression and anxiety. Different. It also does beg the question, they're in the future, though, of Picard's show. They're effectively in the 23rd century, somewhat Picard was born in 2305, so they would be in 2315 roughly. So during the events of the original series, but after the movies, during the time of the Enterprise B, there'd be no reason that they couldn't. It'd be a little either before or after. It depends on when the Tomhead incident happened. It could be after the Enterprise B. The Tomed incident is 2311. So it's somewhere in there. So yeah, and little Picard is a little too old to play hide and seek. So it's odd. Little kid, yeah. So they're just like, maybe that's why he thought it was odd. He's like, oh yes, I'm 12, mother. Why would I want to play hide and seek? It's for children. Oh. The chateau. There's a lot of backstory stuff that's explained that it's better to show not tell, and they're telling it. Like, oh, I need to explain my Ravi, and I got to talk to hologram Eleanor and whatever. And it's like, yeah, he's essentially dead. He's on the ship somewhere. I wanted them to throw in the gag that Rios, wanted to stay with the doctor lady and have the doctor lady have Rios reveal it. Actually, I can't be with you because you see, you're my great, 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 great grandmother. And that would be kind of weird. It would screw up the timeline. If we got together. Yeah. And the space launch, they're probably not going to show. And the finale, they're literally running up against Strange New Worlds, new show, and it's going to be in the same week, next week. So, so they're running up against that, and yeah, there's like, unless they're, I don't know how they stayed on Earth all this time. It seems a little weird that they want to do a longer version of Star Trek 4. It's very goofy. So it's kind of a mess. But if you've read Mary Sue Jumps the Shark, you know how that ends. So we do survive the Borg attack, and the Borg Queen lady and Sandy. They don't stay merged. In my version, the Borg lady takes off, does her own thing, but they get the twins, and they get Chris and Libby from our timeline, and they get them briefly. So there's always the duality of the twins, see, like Chris and Libby, in the timeline, and one of them's evil and one of them's good. They aren't really like that in real life, but the characters, the Tinactus of Borg and Chrysitus of Borg or whatever. So anyway, it's an odd story. There are issues with why it does or doesn't work. They explained away the other thing. It doesn't really make sense because we know nothing about Picard's parents and why the father, I think the father guy, the kid's like 11 or 12. Like, he knows better than to let her out of the room of requirement, whatever, the little panic room. He does it anyway. It's like, they're writing the story, and they're not thinking fourth dimensionally. They're not thinking would they act in this way given a situation. A dissociative disorder, or formerly schizophrenia, is when somebody sees things or hears things that aren't there, hallucinations, or has personality issues, their personalities. Sometimes it's versions of it are caused by, it's a spectrum as well, it's caused by a trauma. In this case, like, Picard doesn't have the trauma or something. I'm not sure how that works. But yeah, it's inherited through the mother side of the family, but then wouldn't it be weeded out by Rini Picard getting married and having a different last name and everything hundreds of years earlier? So it doesn't really work unless she's got a brother and she has nothing to do with the timeline. That brother is actually the one that's in the Picard line anyway. She's not really his ancestor. She's his aunt. So she's a great, 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 great aunt. So it doesn't matter. Nothing that she does leads to Picard in the future. Also, if the timeline worked like that, then anything happening to her automatically changes the timeline, like the butterfly effect. And since already stuff has happened that hasn't done anything, it already proves that she has no relevance to the future, because they've already established that. And and that the evil Soong guy doesn't really, the Guinan part doesn't match. And they have literally an hour left. I don't think they're doing the continuum. They should, but they're not going to. I don't think they're doing the Borg being the proxy for the other Q or something. They're not doing that. The Gary 7 people, I don't know, they could have done something with that agent guy. They could have said he was an agent of the Gary people. They didn't do that. The Borg Queen Girardi steals a ship. Well, if she has DOD, she's got dissociative disorder. She's not going to know that she's even there. She's gonna, insane. And yeah, and aren't there, like, it was still the 2315 or whatever when the incident happened, right? So in the other timeline, so why doesn't it doesn't make sense? Why wouldn't they have like cures for that stuff in Star Trek? Nobody would have that anymore, I think. PSTD would be the only thing they would have. They have like, Star Trek has these medical advancements that are beyond, like, yeah, they don't treat it. They treat it like it doesn't, like they don't do that. Heck, even Dr. Crusher said, "I've never even encountered a headache before." They don't have that in the future. I've never encountered a common cold before or something. Which is kind of funny to say that, because then they later had people have colds. But yeah, the original Star Trek was a socialist utopia, or a humanist utopia, or not socialist, humanist utopia, where want was no longer necessary. Everybody had everything they needed. They have replicators and stuff. Yeah, and things wouldn't necessarily work in the opposite universe like they work here. But yeah, I think they can get out of it because, well, they don't have a ship, but I think they can get out of it somehow. Yeah, how are they? Unless Borg Girardi turns them around and it's back or something. Yeah. Okay. In this one, the Siege of the La Serena, which is literally, if you go back to Sillian realms and go to an episode called Mary Sue Jumps the Shark, the Borg take over the Mary Sue, the ship crashed on the planet, and they take over the academy that's been rebuilt, and the queen, there's a queen on the ship, and she assimilates Sandy, who is basically Tendi from this timeline, but Sandy, who is this plucky girl character. She's a plucky German girl in this version, and she, together the queen and the other one do stuff and try to get away. Also, it's similar to Perfect Plan as well. It's like they took those two stories and they messed with them. There's also San Jose State in there, and the academy and that kind of thing, because of course, because I was going to San Jose State again at that point. This story has remarkably similar plot points to that, including the ending of this episode. They read it. They read Sillian Space. They took notes. They got some things wrong though, because they also saw Starship Chimera, the Destiny device, and they thought, well, let's put parts of that in there too. Let's have Q and Picard show up and argue about their destiny and stuff, and like in that one, and they kind of confused the two. I don't think they're quite aware that the Chimera miniseries and Sillian Space is the same guy. It's the same guys. It's Cal Cat and